During a fight, she threw my keys in the river and laughed. Now you're stuck with me. I just smiled and called a cab. A week later, her father called me screaming. She tried to sell our car, only to find out I'd already reported it stolen and named her as the thief. Our final argument started over something stupid and ended with my car keys in the river. It was the most clarifying moment of our 3-year relationship. We were walking in the park by the river after a tense dinner. The fight, simmering for hours over her credit card debt, finally boiled over. She was screaming. I was stonewalling. Finally, in a burst of theatrical rage, she snatched the keys from my hand. "You think you can just walk away from me?" she shrieked. Her face twisted. And then, during a fight, she threw my keys in the river and laughed. "Now you're stuck with me." She stood there chest heaving, expecting me to yell, to break, to dive into the murky water after them. I just smiled and called a cab. The app on my phone showed a Toyota Prius was 3 minutes away. Her laugh died in her throat, replaced by a look of pure confusion. "What are you doing?" she stammered. "I'm going home," I said. The cab pulled up. I got in, closed the door, and didn't look back. The ride home was quiet. My mind was a strange mix of numb and hyper-focused. The keys she'd thrown weren't just for my car. They were for the apartment, my office, my mailbox. She had in her mind stranded me completely. What she didn't know was that I had a spare set of apartment keys hidden in a magnetic lockbox under the neighbor's welcome mat, a relic from a time I'd locked myself out years before we even met. When I got to our building, I paid the cab driver, retrieved the spare key, and let myself into the silent apartment. My first act was to call a 24-hour locksmith. His name was Gary, and he arrived in under 30 minutes. For $308, he rekeyed the deadbolt and the door orc knob. The invoice, time-stamped at 9:47 p.m., was my first piece of evidence. My second act was to take my spare car key from the junk drawer, go down to the parking garage, and move my car. It was a 3-year-old Honda Accord. Nothing fancy, but it was reliable. And most importantly, the title and registration were solely in my name. I drove it 3 blocks away and parked it on a well-lit side street where it wasn't immediately visible from our building. My third and most important act of the night was a phone call. I dialed the non-emergency police line. I explained the situation calmly and factually. My girlfriend Sarah Jenkins and I had an argument. She took my car keys and threw them into the river to prevent me from leaving. I have since left the scene. I am concerned she will take the vehicle itself using her own tea. I would like to report the vehicle as stolen to preempt this. The dispatcher was professional. She took my information, the car's VIN, the license plate number, and Sarah's full name. She gave me a case number 25881439. The entire call was logged at 10:15 p.m. I now had a legal shield. I went to bed and slept better than I had in months. The next morning, the first barrage came via text. A stream of messages from Sarah starting with confusion, then escalating to fury. "Where are you? Why aren't you answering? You left me at the park. I had to walk home. The door is locked. Let me in." I ignored them. Then came the phone calls one after another. I let them all go to voicemail. The messages were a masterclass in rage. I saved them all. Around 10 a.m., my landlord, Mr. Henderson, called me. I just got a call from a very upset young woman. He said, his voice cautious, "Sarah Jenkins." She said, "She's your wife and you've locked her out of her home." This was her first major play, trying to use the landlord to regain access. She was counting on him not wanting a domestic dispute on his hands. "Good morning, Mr. Henderson," I said calmly. "I'm glad you called me directly. Sarah is not my wife, and she is not on the lease. As you know, I am the sole leaseholder for apartment 5B. She has been a long-term guest, and her invitation to stay here has been permanently revoked." I could hear him shuffling papers on his end. Mr. Henderson was a stickler for rules, a man who lived and died by the letter of the contracts he issued. "That is correct," he said after a moment. "The lease is solely in your name. The guest clause is quite clear. She has been harassing me via phone and text since last night," I continued, "and I have reason to believe she may try to damage the property to gain entry. I've already had the locks changed as a precaution. This was a calculated move. Mentioning property damage is like a magic word for landlords." "I see," he said, his tone shifting from cautious to concerned. "Thank you for informing me. I will make a note of this. If she contacts me again, I will inform her that she is not a tenant and has no right of access. If she shows up at the property, we will call the authorities and have her trespassed." I thanked him and hung up. I immediately followed up with an email summarizing our conversation, creating a written record, subject guest removal and security notice for Apt 5B. The artifact was a digital paper trail confirming my actions and the landlord's official position. The consequence was that Sarah's easiest path back into my life and back into the apartment was now a legal brick wall. She was officially an outsider. The next phase of her attack targeted our social circle. We shared a core group of friends, mostly people I had known since college. On Saturday afternoon, I got a text from my friend Mike's wife, Chloe. It was a screenshot from their group chat, the one I had muted weeks ago because it was mostly just gossip. The screenshot showed a long, rambling monologue from Sarah. It was a work of fiction. She painted a picture of me as an unhinged, abusive monster. He had a complete breakdown, she wrote. He was screaming at me in the park, calling me horrible names. I was so scared. He stranded me there in the dark and disappeared. I think he's having some kind of mental health crisis. I'm so worried for him, but I'm also scared of him. Her friend Jessica was eating it up. "OMG, Sarah, that's terrifying. Are you okay? Do you need a place to stay?" She was trying to isolate me to poison the well so that none of my friends would help me or believe me. She was setting the stage to play the victim. I knew a simple denial wouldn't work. I needed to counter her emotional narrative with cold, hard facts. I didn't reply in group chat. Instead, I sent a private message to Mike and our other close friend Dan. "Hey guys," I wrote, "I'm not going to get into a public soap opera, but I want you to know the truth. Sarah's story is missing a few key details." I then attached 3 files. The first was a screenshot of my Uber receipt from the night of the fight. It clearly showed a pickup location at the park entrance and a drop-off at my apartment building with a timestamp of 8:22 p.m. The second was a photo of the locksmith's invoice, time-stamped at 9:47 p.m. The third was a screenshot of the police report, confirmation email detailing the theft of my keys and car. I wrote a short paragraph underneath the attachments. She threw my car and apartment keys into the river to trap me. The attached Uber receipt shows I was home within 15 minutes of the fight. I was never missing and she was never stranded. She had her phone and her wallet. I had the locks changed because I was concerned for my safety and the security of my home. I filed a police report because she stole my property and I believed she would try to steal my car. "I'm not having a crisis. I'm just done." The response was swift. Mike called me almost immediately. "Dude, I am so sorry. We had no idea. She's been telling Chloe for weeks that you were being controlling. This is insane." Dan texted a few minutes later. "Got your message. Unbelievable. We've got your back, man. Let us know if you need anything." The consequence of her smear campaign was that it backfired spectacularly. By providing a timeline with time-stamped evidence, I didn't just counter her story. I proved she was a manipulative liar. She had tried to rally my friends against me and instead she lost them completely. For about a week, things were quiet. I assumed she was staying with Jessica, licking her wounds. I used the time to untangle the last remaining threads of our life together. The biggest one was our joint savings account. We had opened it 6 months prior to save for a down payment on a house. It had a little over $14,000 in it, with my contributions making up about $10,000 of the total. I went to the bank on Monday morning with the intention of closing it and splitting the funds. I was too late. The bank teller, a young woman named Brenda, looked at the account and frowned. "Sir, this account was closed out on Friday. There was a single withdrawal for the full balance of $14,150. I felt the blood drain from my face. "That's impossible." I said, "This is a joint account. It requires both signatures for any withdrawal over $500. That was the rule we had explicitly set up with the bank manager when we opened it. It was a safety measure. Brenda pulled up the transaction record. She showed me the screen. The withdrawal was processed on Friday at 2:15 p.m. There was a scanned copy of the withdrawal slip. It had my name printed on it and a sloppy forged signature that looked nothing like mine. Sarah had walked into the bank, forged my signature, and a lazy teller had just pushed it through without verifying it against my signature card on file. This was the third major escalation. Felony bank fraud. "I want to speak to the manager," I said, my voice dangerously calm. The manager, a man named Mr. Davies, listened to my story with a grave expression. I showed him my driver's license and he compared my signature on it to the forgery on the slip. They weren't even close. "This is a serious breach of our security protocols," he said. "The teller who processed this will be held accountable. We will be launching a full internal fraud investigation." He had me sign an affidavit stating that the signature was a forgery and that I had not authorized the withdrawal. The artifact was this legally binding document. "What happens now?" I asked. "Our corporate security team will take over," he explained. "They will review the security footage from the time of the transaction. If it shows Miss Jenkins making the withdrawal, which it almost certainly will, they will turn the case over to the district attorney's office. This is grand larceny, sir. It's out of our hands at that point." The consequence of her greed was that she had just committed a federal crime. She thought she was just taking money. She had no idea she was stepping into a world of fraud, investigators, and prosecutors. She was no longer just dealing with a scorned ex-boyfriend. She was about to be a person of interest in a criminal investigation. I left the bank feeling strangely detached. The money was a problem, but it was a solvable one. The real issue was that Sarah was now cornered. She was locked out of the apartment, alienated from our friends, and had just stolen a large sum of money that was now being investigated. She was desperate, and a desperate Sarah was a dangerous and unpredictable Sarah. I had a feeling her final move would be her biggest, and I was right. The call came a week later. It was a Tuesday afternoon. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but it had the same area code as her parents' town. I answered and put it on speakerphone, hitting record on my app. The voice on the other end was a roar of pure rage. It was her father, Richard Jenkins. He was screaming before I even had a chance to say hello. "What the hell did you do to my daughter?" "The police just left my house. They're looking for her. They said she tried to sell a stolen car." "Your car?" I let him vent, his voice cracking with fury. He went on for a solid minute, accusing me of setting her up, of ruining her life, of being a monster. I waited patiently until he finally ran out of steam, his breathing heavy and ragged on the other end of the line. "Good afternoon, Richard," I said, my voice even and calm. "Are you finished?" The calm in my voice seemed to enrage him even more. "Finished? I'm just getting started. You had her arrested." "Let's be very clear about the facts," I said, cutting him off first. "I did not have her arrested. The dealership where she tried to sell a car she doesn't own had her arrested. They ran the van, saw that it was reported stolen, and they called the police, as is their legal obligation." I paused to let that sink in. "Second, the car was reported stolen over 2 weeks ago. I have the police report number right here, filed at 10:15 p.m. on the night she assaulted me and stole my property. I named her as the primary suspect at that time because she was the only other person with a key. There was a sputtering noise on the other end. She didn't steal your keys. You had a fight." "Richard," I said, my voice hardening. "During a fight, she threw my teas in the river and laughed. Now you're stuck with me. That is not a simple fight. That is destruction of property followed by a threat. I took that threat seriously. I reported the car stolen to protect my property. It turns out I was right to do so." He was silent now. The bluster was gone, replaced by the dawning horror of a man realizing his daughter was not the victim she claimed to be. "And one more thing, Richard," I said, delivering the final blow. "You might want to ask Sarah about the $14,231. $50 she stole from our joint savings account by forging my signature. The bank has already started a fraud investigation and has video evidence of the transaction. They will be pressing charges for grand larceny. So, no, I didn't ruin her life. She did. She is a thief and a felon, and she is finally facing the consequences of her own actions." I could hear him breathing, a slow, defeated sound. He had called me to scream, to intimidate me, to defend his daughter. He was ending the call with the knowledge that his daughter was a criminal on multiple fronts with a mountain of evidence stacked against her. "Don't you call this number again," he whispered and hung up the phone. I ended the recording. The final desperate act was over. She had tried to sell our car only to find out I'd already reported it stolen and named her as the thief. It was the predictable end to her spiral. I blocked his number. I blocked Sarah's number. The war was over. I had won. Not by yelling or fighting back on her terms, but by being calm, methodical, and relying on the truth backed up by indisputable proof. I walked over to the window and looked out at the